This video is going to elevate your Japan travel photography and go beyond basic tourist snaps. Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm a landscape and Japan photographer. Japan is a unique country, and with it comes some unique problems and obstacles when it comes to photographing it. So we are going to talk about how you can take your average, boring snapshots and turn them into art. These 9 travel photography tips are going to help you level up your skills beyond just documenting the famous temples and gardens and bring your creativity into the mix. I've got my matcha, so I'm all set to go. Immerse yourself in Japanese culture. To go beyond your average travel photo, you need to immerse yourself in Japanese culture. I've lived in Japan for over 15 years and I'm still learning. Not that you need to go that far, but every effort you make to learn about the historical importance of the area you're visiting will help shape your vision later on in the field. Taking a photography tour may be a great idea, but even local tours of the sites will be eye-opening. You may not have the time you need to exactly get the shot you want, but this is a great way to pre-plan a shot list that you can go back to and visit at a later time, maybe when the lighting is better. Often it's the people that make the culture, so get comfortable with shooting people. This is one reason that I like to use an 85mm or maybe a 135 so you can get good portraits and people shots from a distance. I find it's less intrusive. They often don't realize I'm taking their photo from that distance, so they're also in a relaxed state and a more natural state. Another aspect of immersing yourself in the culture is not just sticking with the popular tourist spots, but look in a local guide for events and festivals that are happening around the time you're visiting. People at these types of events are open with people taking pictures there, and you're more likely to find an interesting seasonal activity. What you're going to begin to see is that Japan is a country full of contradictions, which can be great subject matter for your photography, which also leads to the understanding that there really is no one thing that sums up Japan. A person's understanding of what Japan is varies greatly if you are from the northern island of Hokkaido, the southern islands in Okinawa, or anywhere in between. The fact that Japanese culture isn't static allows you to insert your artistic perspective into your photography. Don't just settle with the tourist route of Instagram shots. Eat at a local restaurant. Choose both a trendy, popular place for a dose of pop culture, as well as a traditional place. Food culture is a big part of understanding Japan, and it's also a big part of travel photography. I would go for a wider lens like a 24mm in order to capture the whole table as well as some shots of the inside decor and maybe some of the other diners. A wide angle can also help you get some architectural shots of the front of the building with or without the street as well, establishing the location. You are going to see different sides of Japan when you visit places like popular dessert cafes and ramen bars for the pop culture, as opposed to traditional places like soba noodle restaurants and sushi places. Mornings and evenings. Choosing what time of day you're going to shoot in can really create some great opportunities to capture some unique shots. The light really makes or breaks your photo. You may have heard about golden hour before. It's the time around sunrise and sunset. The light is softer and you can use the shadows to your advantage. In Japan, there are pros and cons to shooting at both times of day. at sunrise, depending on the time of year. That time can actually be around 4:30 a.m., which means you have to drag yourself out of bed well before that and get yourself to the spot where you want to shoot all before 4:30. Another thing to keep in mind, though, is that often Japanese gardens and temples are private, so they often only have opening hours between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. But a huge benefit of getting up at this time is that there are going to be less people in your shots, or in your way, I should say. As you know, it can get pretty crowded in Japan, so beating the crowds are nice. Now, the evening sunsets provide both a golden hour and the opportunity to get some interesting night shots afterwards. Especially if you're in a city, the neon lights will create a whole new lighting opportunity. A possible con, though, could be that there are going to be a lot more commuters around during that time, which may or may not get in the way of your shot. Research. Plan out some of your shots by both looking at what other photographers have shot in that area, as well as looking on Google Earth. If it's a popular enough area, you might be able to get the street view also. But for landscape photography in Japan, Google Earth is great to see what type of elevation we're talking about and what the terrain is going to look like. Google Images will show you what the most common shots are and dig into how you might potentially take a different photo. Check out the weather forecast and maybe plan to go when it's raining. There will be less people and you might end up with a great moody picture most people wouldn't take. Another Japan-related travel photography tip surrounding research is to search in Japanese about your location. This may require some help from a friend depending on your language level, but diving into Japanese magazines for ideas on where Japanese people go or what they're interested in shooting can set your photos apart. It could be done with online Japanese searches as well, but the domestic travel industry is huge in Japan, and there are a ton of ideas you can get from just looking at the pictures in one of the many travel magazines they have. Pack less. You might pack a full bag of a variety of lenses, but try to pack a day pack of 1 or 2 lenses when you're out exploring a new urban area. Maybe more if you're in a rural area or hiking and you're in a place where you might want to bring a tripod along. Many traditional Japanese gardens and temples still have signs for no flash and no tripods. The no tripod rule is really because of how congested some of these narrow pathways can get. The flashes can be harmful to some of the older artwork and sculptures or pottery, but back in an urban scene, I usually bring 2 lenses. My most common lenses to bring are a 24mm and an 85mm, but that's me. I like primes. Maybe you find that 50mm is the sweet spot for you, or that a 24-100 zoom lens will solve all your problems. Great. I love the idea of working with one lens and adjusting yourself for framing. But in travel photography, you'll quickly find that the less weight that you're carrying will really help you out in the long run. Use reflections. Reflections of a scene are the type of shots we often forget about when we're overwhelmed with a new area and all of our attention is drawn to one particular thing, like Kinkakuji, the Golden Pavilion, for example. Keep an eye out for puddles and windows where you could capture your main subject in a reflection. Japan definitely has a rainy season, so if you can time for just after a shower, you could find some really nice reflection shots. Shooting high and low. Change your angle of shooting. I would guess that about 90% of all the photos out there are taken by people shooting from their standard eye level. Therefore, just by crouching down or looking through the live view screen and shooting from your waist, you'll end up with a different perspective in your shot. Similarly, shooting high above your head will also be different. But if you want to really get that view from above, you might want to bring a drone along. Of course, you have to make sure you're in an area where you're allowed to fly it. Composition. Many of you may have heard about the rule of thirds, where you divide the frame into equal thirds. I personally like to use the phi grid. The phi grid is another way of considering proportion in photography. It looks like the rule of thirds, but you're not dividing the frames symmetrically. The center lines are divided closer to each other. Having studied Japanese garden design and art, a common theme is to strive for asymmetry. Odd numbers of groupings in a design are seen as more natural than even groupings of objects. This plays into the phi grid as well. The phi grid helps you visualize the golden ratio as part of each image. And this is usually a setting that you can put on your camera screen while taking pictures to help guide you along in the moment. The golden ratio is based on the Fibonacci sequence, which are spiral shapes that are important because they form the most pleasing and attractive shape for the human eye. That's not to say that everything you create will use the golden ratio, but it is something to consider when framing and cropping images. Embrace slow photography. We often want to cram as much activity into our travel, but I want you to try to emphasize quality over quantity. It'll make your editing easier as well. Tokyo is an easy place to get wrapped up in the fast-paced lifestyle there, but it's important to take a breath and enjoy the everyday moments along your trip. Focus on your photographic experience. Take a slow and personal approach to seeing and appreciating the culture and nature that surrounds you. I sometimes find it easier to connect with something when I use my Sony 90mm macro lens. With this lens, I am either getting a narrow but detailed focal view of something far away, or really getting up close and intimate with an object like a flower. Don't get caught up in taking nothing but wide-angle shots in order to try to catch everything. In a way, this is sort of a trap of FOMO, or the fear of missing out. Slowing down and making real connections with people and your environment will allow you to bring more meaning to your interactions that can then lead to you taking pictures that have personal meaning to you. Another great way to make your travel photography stand out from the tourist crowd is to add the Japanese aesthetic of yugen, or hidden beauty, to your shots. You can check that out on this video. And please subscribe so I can keep giving you more helpful videos on photography in Japan.